right. So we're joined here by Bixby Stewart. And I kind of found out about you through Instagram. You have an Instagram channel or profile where you share some of your jersey collecting. And what is that profile, the Instagram?
Yeah, so I've named it the Atlanta Roulaire Collection.
Okay. I wanted you to say it because my French is very bad.
Ruler always comes out a little tough when you're an American. I think that the correct pronunciation is ruler, but I prefer adding a bit of British twang to it and saying roulaire.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, thanks for joining us. And like I said, on that channel, you've got a lot of jerseys, and that really caught my attention as a cycling fan, seeing all of those. How did you get started in the jersey collecting game?
Yeah, sure. I don't know that there was really one day where I just sort of committed to becoming a jersey collector, but I think it's more just something that's taken place over a long period of time. So I started mountain biking with my brother and dad when I was a kid. That's kind of how I got into the sport. And then it was in 2000, after a certain American had been terrorizing the Tour de France, that I really got into professional cycling and kind of learning about the sport and how it worked. And of course, I grew up a big fan of Postal Service and Lance and all those guys. So, I was a fan of that team, but I was also a fan of all their gear, right? So the bikes, the helmets, the sunglasses, the kit and all the variations of kit that they had. And so over the years, just as a fan and non-competitive cyclist, I had collected a bunch of the jerseys they wore, the bibs, the jackets, the winter jackets, the vests, all of that stuff. And so that was kind of, I grew up as a fan of the gear and the jerseys and all that. And then, here we are, many years later, and, I've been lucky to sort of get plugged in with this global collectors community where, I think folks take it a bit more seriously and make it a bit more formal of a hobby.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, so what is the community like? How do you go about building this collection? Are there a lot of other people that do this? Where do you get the jerseys and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's so I'll say that I think that the global jersey collecting community is not that big, but I think that the depth of it is one of the things that I just find completely fascinating. There's not that many folks that do this in the United States, right? Cycling's not nearly as big of a sport here as it is overseas. But in Europe, you have guys who collect, you name it, and there are collectors overseas for it. Musettes, jerseys, obviously, jerseys from certain teams, from certain riders, water bottles, helmets, bicycles. It's a very large, very, again, it's small, but again, very diverse set of collectors globally.
And go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, in terms of your question about where do you get the jerseys?
Sure.
That too, there's not one answer, right? They come from a variety of different channels. You could very simply go on eBay today and you could buy a cycling jersey from Zdeněk Štibar, or there's probably something for Lance Armstrong on there today. That's the easiest way to do it. That's also usually one of the more expensive avenues. There's also similar type of secondary market websites overseas. You can acquire jerseys from the teams directly, right? That doesn't happen too frequently, but it's possible. If you have a really good network, you could get it from a rider directly. Again, that's pretty infrequent, and especially here in the U.S., we just don't have those types of contacts. There's also outlets that purchase the gear from teams at the end of the season, and we'll sell them back to folks like myself. There's a company out of Denmark, Pro Cycling, that does that. Company in Girona, Pro Cycling Outlet. You can buy team issued pro gear that these guys get rid of at the end of the season, because once the season ends on December 31st, you can't wear that gear anymore because you get different sponsors on January 1st.
Yeah, the jersey is going to look totally different.
Exactly, different sponsors, different look. Again, they come from all over the place. They come from friends. They also come from other collectors as well. Kind of once you've built up your network.
Yeah, I was going to say kind of the difference in items is big. You've got like water bottles and hats, things that get discarded mid-race, and then all the way up to bikes. You see a lot of teams literally just direct selling their bikes to the public at the end of the year.
Right.
If they've got, depending on what their sponsorship looks like, they may be getting new bikes or something like that. And it's kind of like a source of revenue for a lot of these teams.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, but they're not discarding those. And I would think same with a jersey. It's going to be, either directly from the team or kind of through these outlets like you mentioned. So
yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. So you've got you brought some jerseys with you. Do you want to start on any particular one? And again, like if you're listening, we'll kind of describe it, but also we'll post this on YouTube so you can see it and kind of see the jerseys that we're talking about. Is there one that you'd like to start with?
Sure. Yeah, sure. I've got a few different ones, and I'll sort of caveat this by saying, so I've chosen 4 jerseys that we can talk about, and I'm happy to answer any questions about these or, again, any other jerseys you'd like to discuss. I don't know that these are necessarily my all-time favorite jerseys in my collection.
Sure.
But I think that I hope that they sort of tell a story of, each jersey is unique, and I think they're all unique for different reasons. The first can be from the way the jersey is acquired. So I think the acquisition story tends to be quite interesting around a lot of these. And then secondly, jerseys can be unique because of who wore them, what race they were worn in, a variety of other reasons.
Sure.
And so as I go through these, hopefully you sort of get a flavor for how, this hobby works, at least from my perspective. And so the first one that I'll share is a 2005
Okay.
Nike Discovery Channel winter thermal long sleeve jersey. Looks nondescript to the average eyes. I actually had one just like this when I was in high school that I'd ride around town in. And so I saw this on eBay. It was $15. It was what caught my eye initially. It was an extra small. And so if you just go, browse eBay or these secondary marketplaces, extra small is a bit of an odd size to come by. And so I looked at the pictures, and there was an interesting detail that I noticed, which is that on the tag, there's actually the initials TD on it. So I don't know if you can see this or not.
Yeah. And for those listening, I'll just say it's a Discovery Channel pro cycling jersey, similar to what, the Lance would have worn in the 2005 tour. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And so it had the initials TD in there. And, back in 2005, I was up on Brasstown Bald in Georgia for the Tour of Georgia when a certain Tom Danielson won the stage.
Okay.
And so I sort of thought maybe that was Tom Danielson's jersey. I mean, he was a tiny guy at the time, extra small is an odd size, TD in the tag. It's $15. I'll take a risk on it. So I bought the jersey, and when it arrived, upon further inspection, it's got grease all over it. And then when I opened it up, I discovered that, I don't know if you can see this, there's a radio pocket on the inside.
Radio pocket. Yep.
Right. So that's a dead giveaway. This was not a retail jersey. This is not something that I could have gone out and bought. So yeah, in fact, this did turn out to be a jersey that belonged to Tom Danielson back in 2005. And, I think that story is interesting because it is possible to find these gems, on these websites like eBay. It doesn't happen very frequently, but it is possible.
So that was just listed as a normal jersey,
right?
Like just, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Some seller who had, 1,000 different pieces of sports equipment, and they had no idea what it was. So, kind of a cool story. And again, it's fun because I was a big fan of his back in 2005. So, interesting story in terms of the acquisition. And then of course, finding out, that it did belong to a rider.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so was that something that was most likely just discarded in the Tour of Georgia, or, how would that have gotten into that, the eBay seller's hands potentially?
Yeah.
Or you don't know. Yeah.
It's a good question, and a whole lot of this hobby, one of the fun things I find about this hobby is that you really don't know a lot of that history. So, oftentimes you kind of have to track it down as best you can. But yeah, for that jersey, who knows? Back then, I don't think many guys were racing in thermal jerseys. I think that was more likely a training jersey. And, it may have just been used for, preseason training at a training camp. It may have been used throughout the entire season for training, out of his home base. Who knows? I'll never know. But
yeah.
that's just one example of how you can get lucky sometimes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that's example one.
Okay.
Example two is, again, once you get into the hobby and you sort of build a network of folks who do sort of the same thing. Sometimes folks are just nice to you and they sort of see where your passion lies, right? I grew up a Postal Service fan, and I think folks sort of know that. So I was actually in Paris for the tour in 2009 and 2010.
Okay.
And we got to link up with other Americans, and we spent the whole day with them on the Champs-Elysees, and built a great friendship. We recently reconnected, and that gentleman sent me this completely outstanding 2005 Nike Project Swift Discovery Channel time trial suit.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is another one where this was never something we could have purchased at a Nike Town or on Nike.com or anything back in the day. And this is an example of the acquisition story I love, because this is a gentleman who I built a friendship with a very long time ago. And 10 years later we reconnect, and he sends me this fantastic piece of history. But I like it as well because I don't know who this belonged to. I'll never know whose kit this was, but the technology behind this was really, really, amazing, especially back, in 2005. Nike had created this Project Swift where they were tasked with designing the fastest speed suit possible. And all that technology was used for track and field athletes. It was used for Olympic athletes as well as Lance Armstrong. And so when you look at this suit here, it's got a variety of different materials. It's got this dimpled material on the sleeves, this very, very, aerodynamic, non-wrinkle polyester on the front. And interestingly, you can also sort of see even the way the seams flow on this piece of kit, they flow as air would flow over the body on a bike.
Okay.
So, again, it's interesting because this was one of the most technologically advanced suits in 2005. It belonged to somebody on the team. I'll never know who, but I think that this was, an important suit, because nowadays you look in the pro peloton and guys don't race in jerseys anymore. They all race in these one-piece skin suits.
Yeah. And the dimples on the sleeves is a big, the dimples on the sleeves is a big thing now.
Yeah. I mean, that was groundbreaking technology, in 2005, but I think a lot of the technology that's in that suit, you probably still see in the pro peloton today.
Sure.
So yeah, that's another example of, you build this network of friends just through being a fan of the sport. And, every now and then you get something really nice like that in the mail.
Oh, yeah. So when you, in 09 and 2010, did you go just to Paris, or did you follow any of the other stages, or what was it like when you went and looked at the tour those years?
Yeah, we just did Paris.
Okay.
And so, I was over there with my family. We did the same in 2005, as we thought that would be, the last tour that Lance and those guys did. But yeah, it was fantastic. We didn't do the VIP experience or anything like that. So, we get to the Champs-Elysees, we had linked up with the Livestrong and the Lance Armstrong Foundation folks. And we sort of set up this American contingent on the front row of the Champs-Elysees. Okay.
Yeah.
It was just a really cool experience. You get out there at 5, 6 a.m., got your chairs with you, and we put up the metal barricades so nobody would come into our little territory. Yeah. And you wait for a long time for those guys to come in because they don't arrive until the end of the day.
Sure.
But totally worth it. And at the end of the day, most of the riders will come over and talk to you and take pictures with everybody. So definitely a worthwhile experience. And Paris is nice too because they do so many laps around town.
Sure.
That if you're going to wait for 12 hours, you at least get to see them more than once.
More than once. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. I've done some of the mountain stages, and I've never done Paris, but you see them once, you're kind of out there camping, right, doing different stuff, but the parade goes by and then they go by and then you get off the mountain.
Right. Yeah. Look, I mean, I've always wanted to go, I've always wanted to go out to Wes or Ventoux or, some of those, some of the more epic climbs, but yeah, for sure. I think it's probably a very different experience. I don't think one's better than the other. I think they're both just completely different.
Sure. Yeah. Cool.
So that's example 2. I'll show you a couple more. This one, this is one that I acquired via an exchange with another collector in Europe. And this is quite common in this global collecting community to exchange jerseys. And, there are some folks who I find are purely financially motivated with respect to their collecting hobbies. They just want to buy something cheap and clip the biggest margin they can and, sell it for the most they can. Other folks just sort of have a passion for it. I would say other folks are kind of like myself, where they, everything that I acquire, everything that I put in my collection, I intend to hold. I don't have any plans to sell or exchange any of this.
Sure.
But yeah, exchanging is quite common. And so I had a gentleman in Europe reach out to me late last year. He knew that I'm a big Vanderpool fan. If you follow the sport, of course you're a Vanderpool fan. And he had seen another one of the jerseys that I owned, and he was interested in potentially exchanging with me. So, I agreed to it. I thought it was a fair transaction, and I was really, really excited to get this fantastic 2019. It's a Callus. Callus is the brand. Been primarily jersey for these guys, but it's interesting because, again, this is not something that was ever sold, through retail channels. But when we think of Matthew Vanderpool in 2019, I think most of us think of the Dutch kit, right? Because he was the Dutch national champion for the majority of that season. But there were a few races after he concluded his mountain bike campaign where he didn't defend the jersey on the road because he was in the middle of his mountain biking season. But he did actually wear this kit for some of the last races of the season. So I love this one because it's again very hard to find real team issue race worn stuff for a legend like him, but also because if you don't know enough about jerseys in the sport, you really wouldn't even know that he ever wore a jersey like this because it just was seen so infrequently that season.
Sure.
And again, how do you know it's his? The dead giveaway is the Dutch stripes on the arm, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I was excited to get this one, and I think that's just the acquisition story I love because I don't really do much exchanging with other folks, but I appreciated someone reaching out to me who had seen my collection and just sort of knew where my favorites lie.
I was gonna say, so like, how common is that? Have you done exchanges before, or was that the first and only? Or
yeah, for me, that's my first and only. But I think amongst other collectors, I think it's very, very frequent. Like I said, I take a bit of a different approach, and it's also different because I'm here in the United States.
Sure.
Most of these guys, there are a lot of folks in Belgium, and I think that it's just a lot easier to transact, right? If you're regionally much closer to one another. But yeah, again, I sort of take the approach of, anything that I get, I don't purchase or invest in something with the intention of getting rid of it down the road. But again, if folks reach out and they'd like to do something like that, I'll always consider it. That was an example where, I was happy to make something work.
Sure. Have you connected with any more like US collectors through like having the Instagram or anything like that?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. When I started, when I sort of made the decision to start this Instagram account and just share, it's just a side hobby that I think is fun, and I figured other people might enjoy it too. It was really cool. I realized that there are definitely some other guys here in the US who are, who are very, very legitimate collectors. Guys who are much more legitimate than I am, who have, amazing jerseys, from some of the biggest stars in the world. They have personal connections with these riders. And, again, kind of what I said earlier, one of the things I love about this hobby is that everybody's kind of got their thing. Everybody's kind of, you can sort of look at someone's collection and tell, a lot about that person's history in the sport and their favorites in the sport. So, you sort of see that too here in the US. The other guys I speak to, they've got their own favorite riders, and they've got amazing jerseys from those riders. So it's kind of cool that we all have different interests, or different interests within the same hobby, if you will.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Different niches within the collecting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's 3 of the 4. And then, so the last one I'll share with you is from a name that, I think should be a household name within the professional cycling community these days. But if you don't follow cyclocross, maybe you'd be less familiar with him. But it's a Tom Pitcock race suit. So here we have a 2017-2018. MAP is the manufacturer. This is Tom Pitcock's Elite Cyclocross National Champion Winter Cyclocross skin suit.
Wow.
So it's fleece and Roubaix lined. Obviously, it's a one piece skin suit, and it's tiny. I don't know anybody who could fit into this but him. And he was nice enough to sign this for me. But it's really I've been a fan of him for a few years. I think that he's one of the good guys, one of the protagonists in the cyclocross world. He's one of the few people that can actually rival the two dominant legends of the sport today, Wout and Van der Poel. So it's been fun to follow him. And, the story around this one, I also really like. And so in 2019, he had posted on Instagram that he was going to be selling a bunch of his old kit to raise money to fund the purchase of a number of trees that him, his mother, his family, and volunteers were going to be planting around the UK. And so, so he posts all this stuff online. And again, I was extremely excited to be able to get something like this, which it's nice to see. He was a U23 at the time, but elite national champion, which was so impressive. And he was nice enough to sign it for me. But he ended up raising nearly 5,000 pounds, I think. They bought 2,000 trees. I'm not sure how many have been planted yet, but it's it's not a typical way to acquire jerseys. And, that doesn't happen very often where riders will sell their stuff directly to the public.
Sure.
But it just goes to show that, when it comes to acquiring this type of stuff, there's just so many different ways that it can be done. And that's, just another very, very interesting jersey from a very, in an interesting way that it was acquired.
Oh yeah. And that's part of the story, and part of the jersey is that acquisition story and how you went about it. And it adds to the whole fabric of the jersey.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Are those collectible water bottles behind you, or do you collect kind of paraphernalia besides the jerseys? Or
I wouldn't say that I wouldn't really say that I formally do, but oftentimes just as a byproduct of, this hobby, stuff like that pops up. So this one is it's a four Gold is the nutrition sponsor for Alpes and Phoenix. And it's actually co-owned by Matthew Van der Poel. And so that's signed by him. And then over my left shoulder, we have an Olympic Games from 2012 water bottle signed by Sir Bradley Wiggins.
Cool.
And so, I don't really formally collect other stuff, but when you get to know, the folks in this community, sometimes cool stuff like that pops up. Yep.
So Bradley Wiggins, I noticed that book behind you as well. Is that your favorite writer? Do you have a favorite writer nowadays, or, throughout your first few years of collecting and that kind of stuff?
Yeah. He's definitely one of my favorites. Do I have one favorite? Growing up, without question, anybody who knows me would tell you that, that I was a big Lance fan, and we all sort of know the controversy around that. But look, for, him and Postal Service and everything that those guys did back then, that was kind of one of the reasons I initially got into the sport. So, sort of irrespective of, the negative consequences of, all this transpired there. I'll always, sort of be a fan of the sporting accomplishments, of him and his team.
Yeah.
And then, over the years, they're just, the Cancellars of the world. I always love watching, such a dominant, powerful rider who can just roll off the front of the peloton.
Yeah.
Just made it look so easy.
Yeah.
Wiggo, if you like the sport, especially if you're a collector, you have to, he's got to be up there with some of your favorites. And then, sort of today, it's quite the consensus view, but I think you have to love the way that, the Wout van Aerts and, the Mathieu van der Poels of the world, the way that those guys ride. it's unlike anything that we've seen in recent years. So, but yeah, I could talk all day about my favorite riders. I'll try
Sure.
I'll try not to take up too much of your podcast doing
No,
that
no,
though.
no. That's good. Yeah. I'm kind of guilty of the exact same thing with Lance. Like that's like just my, when I was growing up or whatever, that's kind of what got me into it was,
Mhm.
his dominance. I think I kind of came around in like his third or fourth, tour win. My like mom was actually watching it and had me watch it. So I just got sucked in.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
kind of the same thing. It's like, uh what's transpired, everyone knows the story, but it's, at least for me at that time, it was a big, it was a big reason that I got into the sport or became a fan of the sport.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that there's a whole, I think there's not just one generation, right, of cyclists, and fans of the sport alike. I think there's many generations of folks, right, who probably stick to that same script, right?
Yeah.
So again, there's no need to get into the backstory of the controversy, but yeah, look, without Johan Brunel and Postal Service and what those Americans did in France years ago, who knows? Maybe I wouldn't be a fan of cycling at all today. Which seems crazy, but
Yeah.
it's because of those guys that I got into the sport, and here we are today. 20 plus years later, and I'm as big of a fan now as I was, even back then.
Sure. What do you think about, just a little bit on the stuff on the road? Like, what do you think about the future of the sport? Like, do you see Pogacar and, someone like him, potentially being a
Yeah.
dominant force like somebody like Lance? Or do you think, um, there's going to be more of kind of a mixture of winners throughout the upcoming years? Or where do you see some of that?
Yeah.
Or do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can say that without question, I'm extremely excited about this young crop of riders that we're seeing today. Um, and I mean, you want to talk about Wout and Vanderpool, and I don't know how old those guys are, 25, 26, but I mean, Tom Pidcock, this guy's he's a grenadier and he's 21 years old. Yeah, I mean, Pogacar, you can't have this discussion without talking about Remco as well. And I hate that he's injured and still recovering, because I think that he is, when you look at this, the young cyclists, I think he's the one who has the most, as we think of stage races and the dominance that we saw from Lance back in the 2000s and late 90s. I think that he's probably the one that sticks out as having the most potential, right, to be the most dominant when it comes to
Okay.
races like that. But yeah, I mean, we're sort of seeing the beginning of one of the greatest rivalries in the sport today, right? In the one-day races between the Dutchman and the Belgian. But it's hard to say. I don't know that we'll. I'd love to say that we will see somebody that dominates and wins 7+ tours in my lifetime. But it feels like the playing field is is a little bit more level now than it was then.
Sure. Yeah.
Which I think is exciting.
It's exciting. Yeah. And I mean, the odds of something like that happening, it's sort of, and I mean, I know these are Johan's words, but when they ask like, who's the next Lance, who's going to take over? He's like, there is no
Yeah,
next
totally.
Lance. You can't, but I think, yeah, like the young guys is really, really encouraging. I mean, especially now, I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, it didn't quite look like that, but now there's a lot of really young guys who, probably are going to do big things for a long time.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
look, and they're fun to watch too.
Yeah.
No fault to Team Sky. I mean, their strategy has been very successful, but
Yes.
pro cycling, I think, has been, I don't want anyone to send me hate mail for this, but I think it's been quite boring for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
And, as you have all these young guys who, step up to these big races and are launching attacks 50, 60K out. I mean, it's a lot more unpredictable. And as a viewer, I mean, it's fantastic. So
It's a better product.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love the racing style, I love the aggression. I think, I think it's going to be a great sport to watch over the next, 10+ years, hopefully.
Awesome. Well, do you have any big targets that you're hunting for on the collecting front? What's the next big thing you're looking for?
we're this little community of people like myself. We're always hunting. we're always looking, and we're always trying to find the next thing. I don't know that there's really one thing that I'm looking for. Because, again, if you could have any jersey in the world, if you ask me that question, I don't even know what I would tell you. But, everybody would love to have a race worn suit or a race worn jersey from a Grand Tour leader, or, the Paris-Roubaix winner that still got the dirt, and, the mud all over it. So, I think that those are sort of the things that we're all hoping to eventually, own something like that. But, in the meantime, I'm trying to keep the collection sort of small and focused around, some of my favorites, and you can look at my Instagram account and sort of tell who those are, right? It's the old, Lance Postal Service type gear. It's, the Vanderpool and Wout gear out there today. I'm also a big fan of, his Denix G-Bar. So, I'll keep my eyes posted and sort of see if there's anything that pops up. But yeah, like I said, it's, the good and bad thing about the sport is that you're always looking for the next thing, and you're always hunting for something new and exciting.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, of course. Well, this was awesome. I really enjoyed this, and I'll post kind of like the Instagram link below so people can, go look at basically your whole collection and kind of see for themselves what you've got. And if they want to reach out to you, they can do that there as well. But I really enjoyed this. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. And hopefully, the Instagram should give you a little bit of insight into, how the collection looks today. And I still got, plenty of things that haven't been shared on there. So I look forward to, continuing to share those with, folks like you and other collectors around the world. So yeah, thanks again for having me. I really appreciate the discussion.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you. You have a great day.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.